Hello and welcome to the MSA Crusaders. We're here today with Mary Ann. She's going to talk to us about her husband, MSA Angel, Gary. Mary Ann, can you tell us a little bit about Gary and what he did before he was diagnosed with MSA?
Okay, Gary was a landscape materials manager. He ran a small company here outside of San Antonio. Handled basically like your rock, your decorative rock and soils and things like that for landscaping for companies as well as individuals.
He was into making yards and all that really pretty then, huh?
Right, right. He did a lot of xeriscaping here because of the drought conditions a lot of times, and that's been very profitable for that company up until the time he had to leave work there.
What did Gary enjoy doing in his leisure when he wasn't at work?
Oh, he loved to tinker with stuff. He was always creating something. He had a blacksmith forge there at the
Ooh.
property he used to live at, and he would create stuff out of that from metal and different things. He also loved to go fishing. Fishing was a big thing for him. Gardening, especially, he loved to garden. Um, that's pretty much all the areas that he really enjoyed. He did enjoy some history, learning a little bit about his heritage too, because he was mostly of German ancestry, and so he always got liked listening to the elders tell stories about things that were there. His grandmother, um, on his dad's side, had owned the Myers Pottery there outside of San Antonio, and that's kind of a local legend around here. That if you own any Myers pottery, it's considered very valuable. I have a few pieces, so.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, can you tell us about Gary when he got diagnosed with MSA? Was he diagnosed with something other than MSA first to begin with?
Yes, yes, he was misdiagnosed with Parkinson's first because I noticed, we were married in 2004. 2005, 2006, I started noticing him with a little bit of a tremor in his left hand. And I thought, well, he works with the heavy equipment with the loaders and all that kind of stuff and the shakers for the to shake out the rocks out of the soil and stuff like that. I said, well, he can have a little nerve damage there from that. And I said, well, that's nothing,
Yeah.
to worry about. But then when he started shuffling his feet, I go, whoa, wait a minute, that's not good. I mean, he was only 49 years old. I said, no, you shouldn't be shuffling your feet at 49. So we finally went in to see we saw our primary care physician, and Dr.
Mhm.
Gwen Poole said, same thing. I think there's something else going on here. So she hooked us up with a neurologist in the medical center area, and he went through some of the history with him and all that, and finally said, yeah, he said, I think you've got early onset Parkinson's. So he started him on the Cinemet, or the carbidopa, and it worked for a while. Actually started him on the patch. There was a patch that was out. I
Mhm.
forgot what it was called. And then they recalled it. When they recalled it, then nothing worked after that. It was
Wow.
kind of strange. That patch did work, but they recalled it for some reason. They said too many people were having an allergic reaction either to the glue or something, or the chemical on the patch itself. He never had a problem with it, and actually he was doing real good on it. Well, then after that, we fought with it for a couple of more years, and so he was getting weaker and weaker, and he's losing his balance, and he got where he basically couldn't hardly walk across the room. And so we started hunting material. Things like, I had, wheelchair, things like that.
Mhm.
We, my insurance wouldn't pay for a lot of the stuff because he was under my insurance at work, and they didn't want to pay for it because they didn't understand what MSA was. They didn't. And when we filed even for disability, then everything, we got turned down the first two times. They told us it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a real disease, that we were making it up.
Wow.
Yeah, and finally the third time, I finally got a hold of um, the caseworker who hadn't been jaded by the system yet. She just started working there about 2 months before, and she got us in contact with one of their doctors, and we went to their doctor. He was a young man, originally from South Africa, had been trained at King's College in London, and Gary barely gets in there with the between the wheelchair and the walker, and he says, this man has got an issue. He says, I think it's either MSA or it's Lou Gehrig's disease.
Mhm.
He goes, I said, which one do you think it is? He goes, I'm thinking it's probably MSA. I
And
said, I think you nailed it pretty well. So he
how
ran us
long
through a battery of tests, and he was right. So
how long did
any
it take between the time he was diagnosed with Parkinson's till he was diagnosed with MSA?
About 3.5 years.
Wow, that's a stretch.
Yeah. And then we finally started. And then after that, he got the doctors put in for the award letter for this disability. And of course, you have to wait on that. Now it's a
Hmm.
compassionate allowances that you get right away. But
Yes.
then you had to wait. You had to wait 6 months for the first check. Then you had to wait another year and a half then to get on Medicare and all that. So now it's totally different. Which we went through that spell where everything was transitioning, and it was really tough. And trying to make a go on my salary alone was not easy. And,
Hmm.
we tried buying used equipment. Like his first power chair was a used one that it didn't even function properly. He took it apart and cleaned all the contacts and everything, and he got it working perfectly well. There was no problem.
That's a great guy right there. You know,
Yeah,
typical man. Let me take it apart. I will be able to fix it. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, let me tinker a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. So how old was Gary when he passed away?
He was
Yeah.
57. He had turned 57 that August before, 57 and a half, you might say.
Oh. Well, can you tell us how it affected his mental health?
He got depressed toward the end. It was really bad. At first, he was a fighter. I mean, he didn't want to give up. And then toward the end, as the more immobile he became, he was so tired. And he said, "I'm ready to go. I'm just ready to go."
Mm-hmm.
And he was very depressed. And I tried everything. I wouldn't let him sit at home a lot of times. So once we got the handicap van, and he had his wheelchair, his power chair, and everything, I got him and we went to Colorado. We went to Arkansas. We took trips and stuff, things he never got a chance to do prior to that. And we even went on a couple of cruises. We went to
Hmm.
Hawaii and stuff like that. And I said, at least you're going to see part of the world before you die.
That's
I got
Amen.
great.
so he, he
That's
was he
great.
was tickled pink that we were able to do that. So
Yeah, my doctor said, live each day like it's your last and do what you can while you can. So it's important, I think, when they do get an MSA diagnosis to get out there and see the world of however much of it they can.
hmm.
You know,
Or
Gary,
we can.
at some point, right? Yeah, Gary's diagnosis was how mine started. I mean, besides rheumatoid arthritis, it was a toss up between ALS, otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease, but ALS and MSA. It was, I guess people say Parkinson's too, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's those muscles start to waste away. They can usually see ALS. Well, ALS is very hard to diagnose because they have to rule out everything else. Like that's the
yeah,
only way you can get ALS. So no matter what, I guess it was going to take a while to get to some
yeah.
type of diagnosis.
My high school senior class president died from ALS, and
Wow.
and yeah, we watched Curtis really go downhill so fast, and it was scary. He was actually the poster child for the ALS society for at one point, because he wouldn't give up. They went out to California to do fundraisers, and I think they went also to the East Coast somewhere to do a fundraiser there and things like that until he got to the point where he really could not get around. He wasn't getting enough oxygen in. He had to be bedridden after that point. So,
Well,
but
caring for somebody, Mary, I know is really difficult when it with someone like it with MSA. How did that affect your emotional?
oh, me, I'm just one of those people that I just get tougher. I get tougher, and I try not to let it bother me, but
Good
it
for
did
you.
bother me in the way because with doing transfers with him, he'd always want to help me with his transfer, and I kept telling him, "No, Gary, plant that foot, let me to pivot you," and he would invariably try to help me, and then we'd be off balance and we'd fall,
Oh
and
no.
course, then I'd mess my back up with him with that because of that and stuff. And it was so hard for him to let go of independence of any kind or being
Oh
able to.
yeah.
And I finally got him toward the end that he finally understood that he can't do it. He has to depend on me or another caregiver there to help with him. I had my granddaughter move in with us from my first marriage, and she was an nurse's aide, just basically to help me because there were times when I couldn't even cook in the kitchen or anything, get anything ready for him because he'd be you know he had a little bell thing that he would hit and he wanted me. And I said, Gary, I can't keep running back and forth. I got stuff in the frying pan or something like that. I said, this is not safe. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And if I was out of his sight, he would panic.
Well, we
So
hate to lose our independence. It makes us feel like we lose our livelihood. So I know exactly how he was feeling
yeah,
during those
that's
times.
tough. And we ended up moving back down to my hometown, which is Panna Maria, which is south of here, about an hour's drive.
Mm-hmm.
And, that way I had better support system for my family down there, because his family was small and they're scattered. One brother was living up in Aledo, Texas, outside of Fort Worth, and the other one was in Michigan. And the sister was there, but she was working such strange hours she couldn't help a whole lot. And his mom was not. His mom lived on the same property we did, but she definitely, it was at her age already. She had no strength to be able to lift him or anything. So, but at least she would keep him company while I cooked and stuff like that. I figured out, well, I'll just get Julie to come down and stay with us during that time. So, oh, and going back to that, we got fortunate that when they started the Eagle Ford oil shale movement down here and started drilling oil wells on the property that I inherited, the first thing they did is they put a pipeline in, and I got a big chunk of money out of that, which helped us up a whole lot to get by.
Oh, good for y'all.
That helped a whole lot, and that made it possible to do those trips and stuff, and buy the van and
Mm-hmm.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
Well,
yeah.
with having him being diagnosed with MSA, it was an inevitable ending.
Hmm.
So, did you get advanced directives and things like that ready for him
What?
before he died?
Yeah, we had contacted my attorney down there, and he wrote up his will, his power of attorney, his medical power of attorney, all that kind of stuff. We did all of that. Um, that was already getting to the point where he kept putting it off, and I finally said, Gary, we
Yeah.
can't put it longer. You're getting to the point where you can't hardly write anymore. You won't be able to sign those documents, and you have to be able to sign them. So he finally said, okay, let's make the appointment. So we did that, and he barely was able to sign his name to those things, but we had witnesses there and all that verified that he did it himself, and he was in a sound mind, because he kept asking questions of the attorney about things, how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, and so we pretty much set it up the same as what my parents had set up for me and my brother. So it worked out fine that way.
And if it's not too difficult for you, can you tell us a little bit about the final stages of Gary's life?
The final stages, we had gone on that cruise in October. Then that November, after we got back from the cruise, he really got much weaker. It just all of a sudden it got worse, and he was starting to have trouble with breathing then. And I would sit him upright and prop him up more with pillows, and then he could breathe more easily. So I knew something was fixing to happen, but it was like, okay, the question is, when is this going to happen? And he just got where he didn't really want to get out of bed to go. I would put him in his lift chair in the living room so he could watch TV and stuff. His vision was so bad, but he would put on several shows that he liked to listen to primarily and stuff. And that was at least kind of keep him occupied and keep his mind active and stuff. He could still give you all the botanical names of plants and things like that. Like I said, his mind was
Um,
good all the way to the end,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew it was coming. I think he felt it coming, because he had me drive him out to the ranch that last day, a couple of days before he passed away, just to see the cattle and kind of just view the area and stuff like that. Funny thing is, my mother made me do the same thing about a week before she passed away.
wow.
So they know it. They sense something's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then
How did
that
you cope with it and get back to normal life?
oh it it I just kind of laid low for a while. Main thing was I just couldn't. I just had to stay home and stay quiet, and let me process. This was my second time to be widowed. My first husband died suddenly,
Um,
heart attack, and that had been. And I stayed a widow for 8 years till I met Gary, and we married.
wow.
And so I knew a lot of what had to be done and stuff, but it was like two that close together. They were, well, that's not kind of close, but they were like 15 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it was still tough, you know.
Did you have
And
to see a therapist to help you out?
I spent a lot of time with our parish priest.
There you
Oh,
go.
that's
He had,
good.
yeah, he had a degree in bereavement therapy or something like that, and so I spent quite a bit of time with Father Frank.
Father
And
Frank.
yep, Father Fr- Father Frank Kutash,
That's
and
good.
he
I was
um,
good they have
very helpful.
help.
Yeah, and he actually even conducted the funeral and everything too. So
Oh, good. No, he was a really easy person to
yeah,
talk to.
right. Hmm.
So, Mary, what would be some, as you know, as a caregiver of someone who had MSA, what would be some of those unique challenges you faced, and maybe even unique emotions? You know, that's MSA is such an overlooked, misunderstood disease that it's not the same as having somebody with Parkinson's that might take a long amount of time,
Yeah.
and or Parkinson's that doesn't typically affect any autonomic organs, like you said, breathing and things like that. But what would be some unique challenges you would have faced caring for Gary at this time?
Getting some doctors to understand that they can't just do anything with him. Like when he was having problems with his teeth and everything, I said, you cannot put him under general anesthesia. He has to go, you've got to do something different. And I lucked out that the orthodontist or the doctor that pulled his teeth to get ready for dentures understood that and did the research, and he came through that with flying colors. But at first, it was like when I was telling the girls up front about it, they kind of looked at me like I was some kind of strange animal. Like, what do you mean? And we always use that, like, well, excuse me, you got to understand this is a different disease. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with sometimes with the other dogs. I got my fortunate, our primary care physician that when we moved back down to the ranch had been a longtime friend of the family. And he automatically, I emailed him and told him, I said, we're moving back home. I said, I want you to know Gary has got this. And he goes, gosh, I didn't think I'd ever have contact with somebody with MSA. I knew I learned about it in medical school, but
Wow.
I've never had to have any, so he was very supportive. He went back and retrained and read everything he could on it. And it was very, very helpful when getting us stuff. Because then he was able to sign off on like getting a hospital bed and things like
Mm-hmm.
that on.
2000 teens was when the first version of MSA diagnostic criteria even came out to doctors. I mean,
Right.
this disease was known as many other things, like six, seven other diseases. And so they scattered them and put them all
Yeah.
into one. So I could,
Yeah.
I mean, I could only imagine the how hard it was for doctors to let alone
Yeah.
know what it is, but how to diagnose, how to actually come to the conclusion it is MSA, how hard that would have been.
Yeah. Dr. Saldana said, like he said back then when he went through medical school, it was still called Shy Drager. And
Right.
so that's the other name for it. And he goes, oh, okay, now I know what you're talking about. So
Yeah,
he
what's
said,
the other
yeah,
one? Oliver Ponter or something
yeah.
disease, and yeah,
But he
that's a tongue
tried Drake.
twister.
He went into that and looked everything up, and yeah, and he was really good. I mean, as far as he tried everything he could on our end, and it was actually easier for us to deal with him than it was to come up to the specialist and everything here in San Antonio. So,
Yeah,
MSA is a lot easier to pronounce.
correct. Yeah.
it is. Mary Ann, rather. What are some of your most cherished memories with Gary that you had during MSA? You mentioned that you came into a windfall with the oil and the property that you inherited. What were some of the most cherished times you had with Gary?
The first day he looked at our bank account when it had that much money in it, I'm gonna die a rich man. And the look on his face was like he couldn't believe it. He was in total shock. And I said, well, Gary, this is the way it goes sometimes around here. I
Yeah.
grew up in an oil patch, so I knew kind of what to expect. But, of course, prices and everything had changed back from the 50s when we had the first wells drilled out there on the property. So, but even then, money, you could buy a car back then for $800 or $900, whereas a brand new car. Whereas, now you're looking at, 50, 60,000.
Mm-hmm. For a cheap one.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
You mentioned that you got after the good givings of the oil field that you guys had traveled to Hawaii and other parts.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, how did that go? Was it much easier to facilitate that with the proper equipment and you know?
The the hardest part was the airlines, was getting him,
Mhm.
and that part of that was because of his stubbornness. He did not want to do the suprapubic catheter at first, and so trying to put him in adult diapers and everything to get on the plane, because he would be wet through by the time we got where we were going. So like when we flew to um, let's see, we flew to Fort Lauderdale to pick up that one cruise, and it was like I was thankful that the Fort Lauderdale airport had the family restrooms where I could get
Mhm.
him in, I could change him and everything there. Whereas some of the older airports hadn't gotten that far yet. That was always a pain. Dallas DFW is real good about that too now,
Mhm.
and We flew when we did the Hawaiian cruise. We flew to we flew to L.A. and then from L.A. to Hawaii. Picked up the cruise and went around the islands there.
So
And
our family is a really big cruise aficionados. Like we love cruising. We just came back from a European cruise, and next year we're going on the Icon of the Seas, the biggest, baddest one they got.
yeah,
So, given your travels with cruises with Gary, um, what what recommendations would you have for someone? Pretty soon I'll be on a wheelchair and things on cruise ships. What recommendations would you give for someone who might are still wanting to cruise
yeah. Be
with
sure.
MSA?
Okay, be sure that when you book your cruise, that you book it for a totally handicapped person. The one we got on in Fort Lauderdale, it had the seat that was supposed to fold down in the bathroom to be able to put
Hmm.
him, if I could shower him,
Hmm.
and it would fold down. It was rusted shut. They
Oh,
had
Um,
used it. So then they brought me in one of the little bitty rinky dink chairs or whatever, and he weighed like 270 at that time, and I said that's very precarious. I was not very happy with it, but I managed to get him taken care of that way, and but now things have improved since then. When we went on that other cruise, oh I that was another thing. When we did that first cruise, we did Norwegian Cruise Line,
hmm.
and like I said, that was such a mess because they didn't have anything really truly handicap accessible. They kept saying this deck is the handicap, and they weren't. They weren't. And so I filed a major complaint with them, after the cruise was over, and I had the gal tell me, she goes, "Well, we're a Norwegian cruise line. We don't have to abide by ADA standards," and she hung up on me.
Yeah, but you service the American population. That makes
Yeah.
no sense. Oh my goodness.
So I turned it over to my attorney. My attorney they went after him. They fined them. They fined them $250,000 for that.
Yeah, if you dock in the U.S., I don't care if you're flagged somewhere else, but if you dock or land that plane,
Yeah.
you have to adhere to those rules. Yeah,
Right.
we went on a Symphony of the Seas, the last one we did, and we got an ADA, fully ADA accessible room. And let me tell you, that thing was probably three normal sizes of the rooms, like
Yeah.
wide. I was like, man, no, I'm not happy to have this MSA, but you know what? If having MSA and cruising and getting that big of a room, even the balcony was probably at least
Yeah.
twice the size of a normal one for wheelchairs.
Well, we were with Carnival on that last one to the Bahamas, and we had the room that was right off the tail the tail fin of the ship, and we could go out that door and straight out onto that big balcony out in the back.
Hmm.
Look, I mean, if you went down a level, then that's where the bar was and all that. But then there was that lookout area there, and he enjoyed sitting out there and just watching the tail, the churning of the engines and everything like that.
Hmm.
I
He was
saw
always
a
in,
dolphin.
yeah, and then watching the dolphins when we come into ports and stuff like that. That was another fun
I,
thing for him.
I never saw dolphins on cruise. I saw a lot of jellyfish. I've never seen one dolphin. Where do you guys see these dolphins
I've
at?
never
That
been on a cruise. I
Yeah,
heard that when you go on when they're addicted, though.
they followed the ships into the port. They
I
did
gotta.
at least when we went into Freeport, and then when we went into Nassau. Nassau, there was a lot of them. Nassau.
Hmm. I let's start looking down more often. Okay, good,
Hmm.
good, good. So how was
Yeah.
the transition? Gary passed in 2012. How was that transition back? Was it simple because you don't have to care for somebody and travel, just transfer them with the weight, or did you, like you said, when the going got tough, you got tougher, what we
It,
talked about before. So how was that transition back to life without Gary?
it was like since I had been a widowed once before, this time was easier for me because I expected it. The previous time was totally unexpected. And so I kind of already knew to take things slow and to make sure I had all my ducks in a row and all that kind of stuff when I got ready to do things. And so I waited till April. He died in December, but I waited till April to start changing titles and all that kind of stuff like that, and doing everything. So, and I was waiting on his son to come down from back come down from. Well, he was in Hawaii himself, stationed at Schofield Barracks at the time. He was being transferred back, so I was waiting on him to get back. And I expected him to come down and stay a couple of days with me so we could transfer the title of the house and everything to him, because that was
Hmm.
the one house we had here in outside of San Antonio. And he never did bother to come down. It was like out of sight, out of mind. Once Dad's gone, okay, there's no reason for me to be there. I kept telling him, no, Stephen, there is a reason. You have a house here and all that kind of stuff. And I said, give it a year. I said, if you're not planning on moving back here, then put it up for sale.
It's always going to happen.
Yeah.
So looking back on your journey with Gary having MSA, what's a message of hope you would want to convey to someone who's going through it as a caregiver, or even those with MSA? What's a message you'd like to give to someone?
Well, they are always coming up with new treatments that at least help the symptoms and things like that are better than what we went through. At the time we were going through it, they weren't really sure what was going to work, and what everything was still kind of hit and miss. And now they're getting it narrowed down between all the research that's been done. They're narrowing down, what can be done to either extend life or to at least make the symptoms easier to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, like I said, we went through it. There was very little to be had out there, hardly any information to be had out there. And
Yeah.
that's when if it hadn't been for the internet, we would know. And then we met a friend here that actually just lived a few miles down the road from us, and he had it. He died like 6 months or 7 months later after Gary died. And his wife and I are very good friends. Sharon and I hang out together a lot now even. But yeah, that helped out a whole lot. That those two could communicate with. They would send text messages and emails back and forth about different things and help each other out kind of with it.
Yeah. Did you have much help given to you or offered, and then did you accept much help from people, or did you just do your own thing?
Yeah, well, we did a lot of our own thing, but it was mostly family and a few friends. Gary had a really good friend that was he had been friends with since he was a child in elementary school, and he would come out and help out a whole lot, very very frequently. Lo and behold, just before Gary decided to quit work at work, he ended up dying of a massive heart attack at home, and that really into severe depression and to lose him.
Yeah, that's tragic.
Yeah,
especially a good friend of yours.
Yeah, I mean, like they had grown up from I think he said they met in second grade and graduated together and everything, and he said it was tough to lose him. That's when things kind of got a little more hectic for us and stuff.
Yeah. One last question I have for you, Marianne. Is there anything you'd like those listening and those that will listen in the future to know about the legacy of Gary? And like you said, he was a businessman for so many years in the landscaping business, and you mentioned some things he did personally. Is there anything you want those listening to know about Gary?
That he was very creative. He had a creative mind. He came up with a lot of the things to make his life easier with MSA. He came up with a table that he created that swung away from his lift chair, so he could get up and stuff. But when he needed it, he just pulled it toward him, and it was on a pivot, and he would put his computer up on it and stuff like that. He created his own and built it himself.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, before when he was still able to walk some, but he had a hard time getting out of the wheelchair. He built with the forge. He created a real pretty decorative bar that we mounted to the wall, and then he was able to pull himself up out of the chair with it to be able to walk across the room or go to the bathroom and things like that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped out for a while because I was still teaching then, and it was a case of I couldn't be in two places at once with him, and so he was able to take. Luckily, our house had a pretty open floor plan, so he was able to get around inside the house. I just would tell him, don't go outside without letting your mom know or something like that. Don't do that. Don't go out by yourself.
You had said that someone down the road had MSA as well, and that's very unlikely. They always tell you that you won't personally meet someone else that has MSA because of its rarity. So
yeah,
that kind of made it a little easier, I guess.
The fact that Eric was an attorney by trade, he never was into any kind of landscaping or around any kind of chemicals or anything. Because we always thought maybe it might be the chemicals that Gary handled, like they used the defoliant and stuff like that too to clean out areas before they would re-landscape it and things. Then a lot of the fertilizers that they used and things like that. But then here was Eric had never even been around that stuff, and yet he had it. So it's like, okay, there's no rhyme and reason to this thing,
I've
you
never
know.
been around any of that. Have you, David?
What's that?
Been around any of the fertilizers or chemicals?
Just a weed killer. Nothing. Only the things that have been recalled nationwide. But fertilizing into landscaping and Texas, well, to cornfields and things like that, and cows and stuff. That's a lot of quantity that we probably wouldn't use up here too much. But no, nothing like that.
Even with us with our cattle, we didn't use anything on our cattle that wasn't organic. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
didn't do
I
that.
I want to thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us. And
Yeah. Thank you, Marianne.
Anything I can do to help, I try to. And like I said, we went through where the change was happening when they were finally acknowledging it. It was a real disease and all that. So we kind of hit that lip there, I'm glad I mean, I wrote a lot of letters to congressmen and stuff like that and said, look, you've got to make people understand that this disease is fatal. It does not get better, and it doesn't linger for very long. Most people pass away within 5 to 7 years from it, and I said, you've got to do something about Social Security. That's the issue right there for disability.
exactly.
And but it took after he was gone before they did that. So
Well, I'd love for you to stay in touch with the MSA Crusaders. We've
I will.
enjoyed talking with you today. I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
I'm planning to. I'm just gonna find something for dinner here in a little bit, and I have a roommate living with me right now. My daughter-in-law's sister is living with me right now, and she's been very helpful to me with because the issues I'm dealing with with this urostomy bag and all that. So she's been great. She handles the sweeping and the mopping and stuff like that I can't do anymore. So it's been nice to have her here and that. So she went off to work this afternoon for a while, and so she won't be back in probably till around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock tonight. So I've got some chicken salad in the refrigerator. I'll probably make myself.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I love me some chicken salad. All right, Mary. We appreciate you being on. And
All right.
again,
Thank you so much.
be Mary.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.